Hello and welcome to the Coder Kids podcast, the podcast where we break down technology for parents. If you have a kid who loves technology, you're in the right place. My name is Jeff Ward. I'm the founder of Coder Kids, joined as always by my co-host, James the Man Thornock.
The man. I should add that to the side there. That's great.
He is the man. We are excited for the episode today. We're going to be talking with a guy named V. And sorry, V, when you're listening to this, I don't remember how to pronounce your last name.
It's Sadygov.
Say it again.
Sadygov?
Sadygov.
Yeah, Sadygov. Something like that. It's pretty close.
But V is a student at the University of Houston. James and I are both alums of the University of Houston. Love to I don't know, pay it forward in any way that we can. And V is a super interesting guy because he is in the University of Houston Rocketry club, which is called Space City Rocketry. And I actually thought it was robotics, but apparently it's rocketry. So we had this like long conversation about rocketry, and it's interesting coming from the perspective of someone who knows nothing about rocketry to kind of learn some new things. So again, if you're a parent whose child loves technology or who loves especially rocketry, I think this episode will be super interesting to you.
Yeah. And one more thing is just on my end, my kind of personal update is I've posted all of our summer camps. They're on the website, the online camps. Our in-person camps, we will be having some of those this summer, and we'll be posting those as schools kind of figure out what they want to do in their different, mostly health protocols. So those will be evolving, but if you want to sign up for something that's strictly online, you can do that right now. And we also have some posted for spring break too, which is pretty close, believe it or not. So those are posted as well.
I'm super excited about the podcast today, but James, let's do a really brief personal update. Do you have anything that's interesting going on for you?
Yeah, I mean,
other than summer classes, which are
the
summer's going to be big, guys. So.
It is. Personally, I played this game. It's called Levelhead. We're going to do a summer camp on it, and there's a level that was just insanely difficult. Jeff, I showed you the footage because I wanted you to believe me. But so Jeff challenged me. He's like, hey, can you do this level? And I was like, sure thing. And I did it. There were like 3 levels.
Like I tried it like 50 times, and James was like, oh yeah, I did it like it took him like 2 times. And he showed me the video. Three times? Anyway, then he proceeded to continue playing the game for another like 2 or 3 hours and went to bed very late that night.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
And just conquered these levels that were, if you watch these videos, you'll be like, oh my gosh, James. Like he is so good. James is so good at these platformer games like Levelhead.
Yeah. I don't know about so good. Part of it's luck, part of it's timing. But if anybody's ever played like Super Mario World, where it's a platformer game, you're jumping on platforms, that's kind of what this is like. And I had to jump on like 4 enemies in a row. I had to grab an egg from like the ceiling. I had to throw the egg diagonally at some spikes, jump off of the egg, go up to the next group of bad guys, jump on them, grab another egg, shoot it on some spikes, jump on the egg. And then I had to do that. It took so long and it was so painful, but I just have this thing where like I have to, like I've never come in contact with a video game where like I can't beat it eventually. And so it was just like a point of pride. Like I have to finish this level. Like I can't.
I just give up. So.
So James, that was my personal update. I finished the level and it was super hard.
Let's give a little teaser for next week too. We're going to be interviewing one of the engineers that worked on Levelhead. So
Sam, from Butterscotch Shenanigans.
Butterscotch Shenanigans. So if you want to, if you love Levelhead, hey, next week is your show. Or if you haven't heard of it, go check it out because it's really cool.
All right.
Wait, I gotta give my personal update.
Oh, well, okay. I thought I included you. That was our shared story.
That was me and James's personal update. So
he's got a cool home theater.
We'll pass it along.
Okay, into the interview. All right. Welcome to the interview portion of Coder Kids Podcast. Here we are with Mr. V. He goes by the letter. You can call him Vugar, but he goes by V Sadygov, and he is here because he's an interesting individual, but also because he's on Space City Rocketry, which is an underused name for Houston, right?
The Bay City?
Space City.
Oh, Space City.
Yeah,
I heard Bay City. I was like, it's
sorry.
I've never heard it called Bay City. But yes,
sorry.
Space City. It is the original Space City.
Yep.
And yeah.
So shout out to H-Town. All right. So first things first, tell us a little bit about yourself. You know, where you're going to college, obviously, and in something interesting here.
Something interesting. Okay. So I'm a student at the University of Houston. I am currently studying computer science. I do plan to move to computer engineering pretty soon. As for something interesting, I enjoy working with electronics and code quite a bit, I guess. Does that count?
That counts, yeah. It's
So
like
James told me that you are running like the robotics, some kind of robotics club down at. Okay, so tell us about Space City Robotics then. Is it like a club down at U of H, or is it like something outside of U of H?
Yeah, so it's actually Space City Rocketry. Not
Space City
robotics.
Rocketry. Sorry.
Yeah, all good. But yeah, so it's a club with the student-run club in the University of Houston. It is under a bigger organization called AIAA, and that's just an aerospace group for university students.
Cool. So what do you guys do exactly? Do you like launch model rockets or pretty large rockets? Like how big are we talking?
So the rocket that
Jeff has some countries he wants to nuke, so we want to make sure that you're up to snuff.
Yeah. Okay, got you. Do you do private contracts for nukes and stuff?
Oh, definitely. No, so the rocket that we launch, its name's Oberon. It's an 11-foot tall rocket. So what we do technically build model rockets, high-powered model rockets. So they do go, pretty high up, and they are pretty powerful overall. So we do design and develop the entire rocket in-house, all the components to it. We do buy some parts, obviously, we're working on building a lot of stuff in-house, but at the moment, like stuff like our motor and our electronics and whatnot are bought off the store, but, we still have to tune them and apply them into our specific use cases.
I'm not going to slight you for buying parts.
Yeah. I heard two people talking at once.
It's like, I'm not going to slight you for buying parts. Like, heaven forbid that you get a circuit board from somewhere. It's like, come on. I didn't invent that camera, I didn't invent these headphones and solder everything together,
I mean, I'm sure that in modern rocketry, a lot of the component parts are outsourced, like even in a SpaceX rocket. I'm sure that I don't know. Do you have any insight on that? Like if they touch every part of it, or if they just kind of outsource the things and put them together?
So as far as SpaceX goes, I'm not positive, but my assumption would be that a majority of their parts, if not all of them, would be in-house, just kind of
proprietary.
Yeah, there you go. Because it's, a lot of it is custom built for their usage. So I'm guessing if it is from a factory, it's, like a one-off thing that they have specifically for them. As for the reason that I felt the need to specify that we bought some parts, there's actually 2 parts to the competition that we'll be going to. There's a COT system, commercial off the shelf, and then there's an SRAD section that stands for Student Research and Design. So the SRAD system would be that, we built all of our own parts, basically every single part of the rocket from the ground up, including the motor, including the electronics. And we are currently working towards that goal. But as it is, we are on the COT system currently.
That's awesome. So
so that's why the distinction.
James, you keep jumping in on me.
I'm sorry. Go ahead, buddy.
All right, here's my question. My question is, could you break down for us just the process of building out a rocket, like one of these more modern rockets? Obviously, I've built a lot of model rockets that are maybe 2 feet tall, 3 feet tall. So pretty small ones. Yeah, what's the process that goes into it? Because the only process I know is like glue everything together and then pop a gunpowder engine in the bottom.
Yeah.
It sounds like what you're building is more technical, and I guess just a follow up on top of that is also like, are these reusable rockets, or is it something that's going to fall to the ground and explode, or what is what kind of goes into modern rocketry, the kind of stuff you're building?
So ideally, it doesn't just go to the ground and explode. That'd be that's not what we want. But
Yeah.
the idea is that it will be a reusable system. You do have to buy separate motors each and every time that you launch. But a lot of what goes behind those little small rockets, like the one you were talking about, those would probably be classified as an L1 rocket. So that just determines by like the motor size. But a lot of what goes into the small rockets is the same thing that goes into the big rockets. It's just the materials that you use are significantly different. So a lot of our rocket is built around fiberglass because it's very rigid and it's very like lightweight. And so we use that, for example, on our fins, on our body tube, on our nose cone. But I think we use it on our nose cone. I'm actually not positive there. But the ideas are basically, exactly the same. You need a body tube, you need fins, you need a motor mount, centering rings. We use, instead of a motor charge, we use an electronic charge from what's called an altimeter. It's basically a flight computer. And what a flight computer is effectively it collects data for us. It gives us pressure, it gives us altitude, it gives us temperature, a lot of useful information, and then it sends it back to us over radio waves. And we're able to read it on our end, and then we can get live information about the rocket, as well as it will determine when apogee is, and it will release a black powder charge to release one of our small parachutes that will assist in releasing the bigger parachute once we reach 1,000 feet.
Interesting.
100 feet, excuse me.
Oh, 100 feet? It's like...
Yeah, 100 feet above the ground, yeah.
Yeah, so are you trying to make sure the rocket doesn't go too high? Is that the goal of the second parachute? Or when it's coming back down? I'd lost you there.
Yeah, so it's when it's coming back down.
Okay, that's what I was thinking originally. Yeah.
So it pops the second parachute to like slow it down. Is that what you're saying?
So the first parachute assists the second parachute, and the second parachute is the main one that will catch all the force and make sure that we don't like hit the ground and destroy the entire rocket.
Right.
Yeah, I guess now that you bring it up, it does seem like there's like this. I guess what you were just describing is similar to like the engine part that we have at the bottom, and then you fill it with like a paper. Then the paper, I guess, burns up during the launch of the rocket as it gets higher and higher, and then once I guess the pressure builds and it pops the top off, and it launches the parachute out.
So
yeah, go ahead.
The actual idea would be that the paper does not burn. It's
so my paper burns.
It's supposed to be a non-flammable paper, so it keeps it from your parachute burning whenever that ejection charge happens. Okay. So it is, as far as I can tell, pressure being built up, and then when the motor has its entirely filled on the entirely launched everything, then you have a lot of pressure there. And a few seconds after apogee, you set a delay. And when that delay ends, then that pressure will be built up enough in there to push out, and that will release the nose cone and release your parachute, or release the body if that's how yours was set up.
Gotcha.
Wow. I want you to talk a little bit about so I'm sure that you've been following a little bit the SpaceX rocketry. I mean, I watch like all the launches pretty much. And it's amazing how they are developing it so it doesn't even use or maybe it does use parachutes. Wait, I don't think it is. I think
just
the most
lands
recent one I saw is it's just using the propulsion on the bottom to kind of like stabilize it and then basically slow it down.
Yeah.
What
are
your thoughts about that? I mean, that's pretty incredible technology, isn't it?
Yeah, it's definitely really cool. I don't know like a whole lot about it, obviously, otherwise I wouldn't be here. I'd be at SpaceX.
Right. Someday.
But Someday, yep.
I was just wondering if like any students have come up with a model that can do anything similar to that, or if we're all just kind of working on parachutes.
I think we're all just kind of working our parachutes. I don't know. I don't think I've heard of anyone doing anything remotely like that. It's definitely, really out there and a really interesting idea, and it's really cool to see it work.
Super cutting edge stuff.
I almost wonder if it would be harder to do with a lighter rocket compared to a heavier one.
Probably because you'd be adding a lot of weight onto it when you're adding those, like catch systems. I feel like, when you're working with, let's say, like a 2-pound rocket, adding 100 pounds extra weight, even if it does, propel itself, it kind of becomes a lot bigger of a difference versus, a 1,000-pound rocket getting 100 pounds.
Yeah.
I thought it was interesting. You said you're thinking of switching to computer engineering. James and I have interviewed a lot of students from U of H, University of Houston represent. James and I are both alumni, by the way. And it seems like I've actually talked to a lot of people who have decided to make that same transition that you're making. I guess computer engineering might seem a little more interesting, maybe a little more hands-on. But I'm curious because we offer like Arduino classes. We have in the past offered like Arduino classes, and I know that there's some Arduino stuff that you guys do in computer engineering. And it kind of seems like when you're talking about altimeters and sensors and things in Rocketry, that actually pertains a lot to kind of the simple builds that we do on an Arduino. Do you think there's a lot, like, again, I'm not a computer engineer, or a hardware engineer, so I'm kind of curious to get your perspective on kind of the sensors that we use at a very basic level on these tiny little Arduinos versus like the kinds of things that you're doing with your club, with your group for Rocketry.
Yeah, so the Arduinos that contain sensors, I'm trying to think of like exactly which ones contain sensors. So we're working with a lot smaller microcontrollers. So keep in mind that an Arduino is a microcontroller. It has, a bunch of little controllers built into one board. Some of the smaller ones do have ARM processors, making them also a micro processor as well as a microcontroller, but it's a little bit of a different story.
How would you classify the difference between a microprocessor and a microcontroller?
So a microprocessor has a proper computing core versus a microcontroller just has like different controller outputs. So we're talking about the difference between like, simple logic gates put together in a compact form to control motors, to control drivers, stuff like that, versus something like a Raspberry Pi, which can support a full operating system.
Okay. So the Arduino, I'm aware of that, the fact that it doesn't have like a CPU.
Yes.
Is that kind of what you're saying? So, so what you guys are running would be something more comparable to a Raspberry Pi?
No. We are running also a microcontroller.
Okay.
I was just like clarifying what that was, as I mentioned.
Yeah, no, you're good. Thanks for the clarification. So then you take a microcontroller, and you're using. You said you use smaller ones than the Arduino.
Smaller than like an Arduino Uno. So we are working with a Teensy. If you're familiar, Teensy 4.1 will be what we're switching to for SRAD systems.
Okay, and so it's a smaller size, but similar in terms of sensors.
Yeah, so it's more similar to maybe like an Arduino Nano, as far as pinout and as far as the other things go, but it is a little more powerful than an Arduino, which is the exact use case that we're using it for. The volume and everything is about the same size, about the same weight, but it has a little bit higher clock speeds, a little bit better capabilities. It has more interfacing. So a lot of our interfacing is going to be done through IC squared. Or I squared C, excuse me. But I would imagine that the main difference would be as far as the difference between us using it versus what you guys would be using would be that a lot of the sensors are a little bit probably easier to work with on the Arduino, mainly because the Arduino IDE and everything is built specifically around that. It has an open source bootloader, as everything about it is open source, versus with the Teensy, while it's majority open source, the bootloader and some other part of it, I forget what it is, it's proprietary. And the purposes of doing that is such that Chinese manufacturers cannot reproduce it. if they don't
Gotcha.
have that part of it. So because of that, you have to do like specific plugins and workarounds, and it gets a little more difficult to get started with it. But after that, a lot of the code and everything is exactly the same.
Interesting.
Okay, yeah.
And would you say the sensors are pretty strong? Because our sensors, like on the Arduino, just the simple projects that we're doing, they'll tend to like break pretty easily. Is there a way to get like high quality sensors for applications like Rocketry?
Definitely, there is. Obviously, you can always build your own if you're entitled to.
Man,
I don't know if that's obvious.
that?
You say this word obviously. So for those parents who are listening, I mean, let's try to explain this in the simplest of terms, partially for my own benefit, right? But you're saying like, yeah, you can build your own sensors. This is the first time I've ever heard of this in my life, so I'd like.
Well, I mean,
can you go into that?
Yeah. You would get like an IC for the sensor, but you'd have like
okay. What's IC? What's IC?
Integrated controller.
Integrated controller. Okay.
In this example, yeah. So IC can be either integrated circuit or integrated controller. In this example that I'm mentioning, it is an integrated controller. Okay. So this would be the actual thing that is measuring and giving off data. Okay. And you can create what's called a breakout board, which is like a little bit of electronics around it that will allow you to more easily adapt it to other things.
Okay.
So
to make it more compatible.
There you go. Yeah.
Okay.
So if you go, for example, online and you search up some random arbitrary sensor, you will probably get, like data sheets and everything. That data sheet will refer just to the chip itself, versus if you go to Adafruit and you search that exact same sensor, you'll get a breakout board that you can just connect wires to, and it works out of the box. So a lot of the interfacing and stuff is taken care of for you to make it simple.
Okay.
So how do you actually create your own sensor? Like, let's say a temperature sensor or something like that.
Yeah, so that was a little bit, I guess, misspoken on my half. I meant that you can like create the breakout board for it and whatnot. That was kind of what I was referring to. Yeah, that was my mistake there.
I was thinking like you could like homebrew manufacture like a pressure sensor. I was like, what kind of operation you got going on, V?
Yeah.
Like that we don't know about in the other room.
Well, I mean, somebody's creating that sensor. I mean,
right.
Yeah, exactly. Someone has to create all the little IC, little small parts of it.
I think that's one thing that's always intrigued me about computer science and computer programming in general is that you've got like your typical applications, like you might say like, oh, I'm going to go and build something in Python. But the people who I think are really incredible are the people who are creating like their own libraries and things like that. And it kind of, the application, I think, to this hardware stuff that we're talking about with sensors is like, yeah, you can be the person that like goes through the whole process of connecting the sensors and adapting the sensors to your needs, but you're not the person that's actually like building the sensor. That person is like a whole next level of hardcore. So
yeah,
I don't know, pretty cool.
But it's a two-way street, because if you created something awesome and then you were the only one to ever use it, I think a lot of people, like, there'd be a lot of missed opportunity, right? So it's like you definitely need the people who are super hardcore and highly technical and understand the way that the data flow. But you also need users, right? You need the users to create interesting and beautiful applications. And there are so many different applications. And Rocketry is a super cool one. Rockets are cool. Like they look cool. They go fast. I love stuff that's fast. There's fire involved. That's legit.
Yeah, fire's cool.
This is sharp. I mean, like, there's so much awesome about it.
V, where did you go to high school?
I went to Clear Creek High School.
Okay, is that down in like Sugarland?
No, that's actually closer towards Galveston.
Oh, Clear Creek. Okay, cool.
Yeah, it's in Lake City.
I know a guy.
Yeah,
and James and I both know a guy. His name is Chu Tran, and he does drones and rocketry for a high school, Booker T. Washington High School in HISD. And I went to their school once, and they have like a whole rocketry lab for high school kids. And I saw some pretty big ones. I guess you said 11 feet?
Yeah, ours
feet?
is 11 feet.
11 feet. Yeah, I mean, it was probably about 11 feet, the large one that I saw. But yeah, it was crazy. They had like a full on, it might have been even bigger. And it was like metal. It was built out of metal. So just like pretty crazy stuff that they were building in that little high school rocketry lab. But how cool is it? I guess my follow-up question to this is, V, what advice do you have for like high school kids who are kind of like interested in this kind of stuff, but haven't ever, I don't know, maybe don't have a club to join or don't have a school to go to where they do rocketry? Like, what are your thoughts on getting involved in this kind of technical stuff?
Yeah, I think that definitely the internet is a great resource. There's so much stuff on the internet, like anything that you can find paid for or anywhere else really you can find on the internet for free, which is something that is a really beneficial thing. A lot of my like understanding of electronics and coding actually came from YouTube, and I definitely think it'd be a great resource to kind of start getting into rocketry. It is not a cheap hobby.
Yeah.
It's definitely not, but it is totally worth it.
Disposable, yeah. There's some disposable parts.
Probably wouldn't hurt to do some basic model rocketry as well, right? Just understand the function of it.
I think that, especially if anyone who is interested should really, try and jump into it. I know that honestly, before I joined Rocketry Club, I didn't think that I was going to be super into rocketry. I had one or two friends who were like really into it, who were always trying to like push it on to me. And I was like, I don't know, I don't think I'm smart enough for that. And I kind of joined the Rocketry Club. I was like, you know what? I'll just, stay in my little comfort zone with my electronics and everything. I'll be okay. It'll be a cool learning experience. And they really got me into rocketry really fast. And, like within a few months, I already built and launched my first personal rocket.
That is really neat. How much does like an L1, like you said, that refers to the size of the engine, right? How much does one of those things cost? Like what's the cost of entry is what I'm asking. Roughly.
So I would say probably about $100 to maybe $110 total cost. And a lot of that cost goes into the motor.
Okay.
So the motor that I bought a little bit of an expensive motor, and I kind of splurged on it a little bit. I can maybe show a picture here if I can share screens in a second. Let me just find one. I kind of splurged on my motor a little bit. I bought one that it's called Black Matter.
Okay.
And what's really cool about it is it gives a oops, that's wrong. It gives a sparkle effect as it goes up. It has like little orange sparkles.
Yeah, cool.
So it actually looks really awesome here. Let me see. Can I share screens? Is that?
Yeah. Disable your video first, and then
Okay.
share your screen if you can.
That's the wrong one. Screen, entire screen. Awesome. Hold up. Let me bring this here. Cool. So this was my rocket as it was launching. Oops. I don't know why it's doing that.
Oh, wow. Okay.
All the way up there.
Yeah, you can see the sparks on the side.
Something that was really cool to do. Oh, there's one when it was like starting up there.
Oh, wow. That's awesome.
That's wild.
Yeah. So you could definitely get, cheaper parts than that, cheaper motors. I spent about $40 on my motor. The actual build of my rocket, I had to buy a lot of parts. I couldn't just find like one part, so I had to buy like 3 or 4. But assuming that, if you have maybe friends that want to do it with you, you guys could definitely like split the costs for at least like 2 people. And I think I ran the cost. It was like $17 for a majority of the materials. That doesn't include epoxy, a fireproof blanket, or fire paper wadding. Does not include a motor, obviously, and doesn't include a parachute. So as long as you have those 4 things added to the cost, plus your motor, and then whatever your launching fee may be for whatever place you're launching with, that in my experience totaled out to be about $100.
Okay.
Well, so and James, you were saying like L1 as well, which I think V said that L1 could be as simple as the kind of stuff that I've launched in the past, right?
Yeah. So L1.
And those are like $20.
So yeah, that's the other thing about it. L1 is probably about the size of yours, but it probably had a little more powerful of a motor.
Yeah.
So motors are referred to by class, and that just refers to the power behind the motor, the thrust, the size. L1s are I and J class, or H and I class, excuse me. And for example, I launched an H class motor, which is a little bit less than an I class. Anything below that doesn't need a certification to launch. For H and I and above, you have to have different certifications to launch them. And
okay.
so in the example that, for example, that I did, I actually got my certification by launching with an H-class motor right there at the organization. So now I am eligible to launch without having to get my certification for that.
That's and great. Where do you launch? Backyard? At the neighbor's house?
No, definitely not. I don't want it to fall into his head. So they actually have dedicated launch sites. So we launch, we being AIAA, we launch with Triple E, and you can also launch with NAR. But those are like the two main organizations. So they have a launch site once a month. They clear out an airport, and we get to launch there.
Cool.
Oh, okay.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So that's got to be a lot of space.
Yeah, it has to be a lot of space for that rocket to come down.
So yeah, I guess that's the other question is how far can a rocket go sideways? You know, because we think about up and down a lot, but like how far?
Yeah, like do you do those tests before you launch, like in terms of wind and where you think it'll go, or do you just kind of launch it and see?
So we do a few tests. Obviously, we do like simulation tests mainly.
Okay.
So a lot of those simulation tests are going to do. It's going to like take the weight, take account the center of gravity, center of pressure, and everything, and it will determine like the speed the rocket falls at, like when it hits the ground, what speed it'll be at, which is important to make sure you don't break anything.
Yeah.
We do tests to see like that each of the components work individually, so that things fire correctly. But as far as like testing the wind and trying to approximate where it goes, we just use a GPS. There is a GPS on one of the altimeters, which is again a flight computer that we're using. So we can get live time data. I actually just got my ham radio license, so I can operate that.
Oh wow!
So it's pretty much like figuring out where it lands once it's gone. You're not like trying to predict where it's going to land.
Yeah, we're not predicting where it lands, but okay. Yeah, once it lands, we try and find it.
Gotcha. Gosh, I lost what I was going to ask.
Well, I mean, I have a question, and maybe you can come with yours later, Jeff. But let's talk about the nitty gritty and like the failures and the just like the biggest problems that you run into. What's a project that you had a lot of difficulty with? Or is there like a specific rocket build that you did, or does everything go swimmingly every time?
Have you ever had one explode? Sorry.
I haven't been around long enough to see if one exploded ever. So I only joined this year, so I am a little bit new to specifically this club and everything. Mm-hmm. As far as I can give you an example of something that did not go smoothly, my L1, it ended up launching fine, but to actually get it there was such like a mess, because every time I did something, I was like, oh, I forgot to account for something else, and now I have to, improvise to fix it. So like every step of the way, I was, making one mistake or another. And so that was definitely pretty interesting to work through, but it was a lot of fun, and I'm really glad that I did end up getting through it all.
So what is it all? What are the particular issues that you run into? And
yeah,
are you talking about like wiring things or like what? What are you talking about there?
So for my L1, I didn't have any electronics or anything, highly motor based. But some of the issues that I did end up running into was so part of the rocket, you have the body of the rocket, and inside the body of the rocket, you have centering rings that will center a motor tube. And the motor fits inside the motor tube. The motor is a lot smaller than the body of your rocket, so it has like a little smaller tube that is kept in the center to hold the motor in place.
Okay.
And you normally have a little bit of your motor tube sticking out on the bottom, so you can add what's called a motor retainer, and that'll hold your motor in place, like from falling down as it launches up. And
okay.
I didn't think about this at all. And so I made my final centering ring completely flush with the bottom of my motor tube. So now there's no space to attach a motor retainer. And the solution was actually
your motor would like literally fall out.
Yes. And I didn't even think about it. And I was like panicking about it. And I was like, oh my God, am I just, because this was like, I think a week before launch that I realized this. And I was like, I'm not going to be able to do this. And so I sent a message to Emily and Alex, Emily, you guys know Emily. She's my project manager, and then Alex is the chief engineer. And I was like, oh, what am I supposed to do? And what it was is they have like screw-in motor retainers. So I ended up having to use one of those. It just sits on the outside, it screws in. So that was a lucky save there.
Nice. Yeah, that's great. I did remember what I was going to ask you, and that is regarding your computer science background. How do you feel like that is either informing your current rocketry, your new kind of interest in rocketry, or how do you think it might inform it in the future? Because I'm sure you're already like pretty decent at computer programming.
Yeah,
so like,
I would say I'm not bad.
Yeah. So how do you use that in the future in the rocketry space, if that's the course you end up pursuing? Or
yeah, so it'll probably be a lot of avionics work. That's where I'm on right now. Again, avionics is flight computer and collecting those sensor data and telemetry and whatnot. So
and
for
can
example,
you describe what telemetry is?
Yeah, so telemetry is just information sent over radio waves.
Okay.
So it's kind of like a wireless connectivity.
Okay.
So
would this all be like C programming language? Because I know that C and C++ can do a lot of like hardware communication. Or is there some other like computer programming language that you would use in these applications?
So we will be using, for our SRAD portion of things, student research and design, we will be using C++ entirely for it. As for the like pre-built systems that we are using, I'm not super positive on what they use. I know that the end user software, not the one that's running on their actual controller, is programmed in Java. But I highly doubt that their actual onboard processes are run in Java, especially considering it's virtual machine based. So it's hardware interactions not very friendly.
Right. Yeah. It's interesting because before I started Coder Kids, my background's not computer programming, and I never really understood the difference between all these different languages. But I guess I've kind of at least come to an understanding that like C and C++ can have more like hardware control, whereas something like Java is really just a software application. Is that fair to say?
There you go. That's very fair to say. One thing that one of my professors told me this year that I really enjoyed was you hear that C++, you can run it on anything so long as you compile it for that platform, which is correct, but it'll run like garbage on everything unless you optimize it.
Yeah. It's interesting to even read about like computer engineering and how you can like control different. I guess that's kind of partly the origin of computer programming back in the day, was like controlling the different hardware sockets, essentially. Like, I don't understand all of it, and maybe you could explain it a little bit, but like basically how each of the different little ports and things, like you can control all those different elements of your RAM or your CPU and whatnot.
Yeah, so it's predominantly transistor based. Transistors will give out, they have 3 pins. You have a information pin, and then power pin, and then a ground for everything. So basically, when an information pin gets either a current or a voltage through it, something that, some electricity to it, it will open up effectively a logic gate that will allow power to go through it. And by doing that, you can assign, either a 1 having power or a 0 having no power, which is a lot of the premise that computers are built off of. And except for quantum computers, but that's a whole other story.
Yeah, we'll not get into that today.
Yeah. So it's basically just the premise of which computers are built off of that. And software does exactly that. It goes down to a binary level and it converts things into ones and zeros, which is, again, high or low power, which is just passed through in all different parts of the computer. And that's kind of how it controls the different aspects of it.
But again, you're talking about hardware control versus just building like a software application, right?
Well, that's exactly, I'm saying that's what like a software application, right? So software application will then go down to assembly level, and then assembly to binary, and then binary to your actual ones and zeros that are going through as electricity. So it is effectively controlling the different transistors, but it's I hope that makes sense, like from the software level down to the transistor.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, it's
Man,
pretty high level.
I am learning so much today. I'm riveted. So if I'm not talking a lot, I'm just soaking it up, man. This is really great because I've done less shooting off of rockets than Jeff has. I've lit fireworks, So that's what I've done. I've lit fireworks, which so
Fireworks are pretty
that's
fun
it.
to do.
Fireworks
So
are cool.
yeah, that's about it for me.
I guess I didn't mention that when I was a third grade teacher in my third year of teaching, I went on this rocket binge, and I maybe it was like the theme of my classroom or something. And I told the kids hey, if you work hard and you pass off all these objectives, then at the end of the year we'll have a rocket party and we'll build our own rockets and we'll launch them off. And we had tons of that school. It was a very long school day, so you can only spend so long on the core subjects, right? So we had some extra time to build rockets, and so eventually we built these rockets and launched them off, and it was pretty cool. But yeah, I guess again that's my whole experience. I'm more about quantity than quality, I guess you could say.
With rockets.
I'm all about, hey, let's build 25 rockets as a classroom instead of
11-footer. Yeah, 11 foot. I'm trying to imagine that's twice as tall as me. Like a full twice, plus a little bit.
Pretty tall.
I'm 5'4", so yeah, it's definitely.
When is the upcoming competition, V?
It's going to be in June or July. Sorry, July.
Cool. In Houston or?
No, in New Mexico.
Oh,
okay.
So, yeah,
you can launch anything in New Mexico.
You really can. Deserts everywhere. Actually, maybe a little bit later, if you guys want, I can bring in my L1, and I have little small 3D printed rockets that I can show you guys too, if you guys are interested.
Yeah, go grab it. All right, V, show us your rockets. What you got?
Yeah. So this is the little 3D printed one that me and some friends launched a while ago with some fireworks.
Oh, nice.
So this is nothing fancy whatsoever. This just kind of, it's like a barbecue skewer through here. It's just the actual motor here in the middle, and then 2 3D printed parts.
And then it looks metallic, but that's plastic, right?
Yeah, no, that's just silk-based plastic.
Silk-based plastic.
Silk-based plastic.
Mm-hmm. And then we have the big boy.
It's Viper. Okay.
Viper, yeah. My friend named it for me and everything, painted it. So the motor through the bottom here, headphone cable's getting caught. Got the motor on the bottom here. This is that little, well, that wouldn't be there. This is the little motor retainer, the little metal part.
Okay, yeah.
So does the motor look like, I mean, I'll have to look one up after, but.
Take this one out if you want.
Oh, can you see? Yeah, if you can.
Yeah.
First ever on the Coda Kids podcast. Hardware. Live hardware.
This will encourage all the podcast listeners to come over to YouTube and see.
Yeah, this is a YouTube exclusive. All of our Patreon subscribers. Just kidding, we don't have a Patreon.
But if we did, it would be huge.
If we did. Just like if we had a sponsor.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask you, is if it looks kind of similar to the other engines that you
looks like a water filter.
It really does, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And you were saying you can't use it again? It's a one-time use?
Yeah, one-time use. So I mainly just have it in here right now. It smells terrible. So I don't have to deal with the smell. But until I get a new motor, I'm just going to kind of leave it so I know. So in case I forget the model number or something, I can always get that. As it is, I do remember it's an H115, but in case if in the future I don't, and I want to relaunch this, I should probably not show my number on here.
Nobody's calling you, V.
That's true.
Don't worry. I might. Anyway, cool.
Well, that is some really awesome. That is some really cool stuff. What's how tall is that?
Probably somewhere around 3 foot. I mean, I'm 6'1". I don't want to stand up because I'm in sports shorts, but
right. Yeah, right on. Awesome. That is super cool.
Do you keep us updated on how you're? Oh yeah, that's cool. That's the the wiring.
Okay, so that's the ribbon, and then that goes to the parachute. Is that right?
Yeah. So it attaches for when it releases the body of the rocket. It's connected in here, and it
Okay.
has a parachute on the middle part here.
Okay.
Pull this out. There's the parachute, and then that's it. It just
So how much empty space is in there?
So just about everything from here to here should be empty space.
So it's like half, or is it like 2/3?
Probably closer to 2/3. I would
Wow.
maybe even say 3/4.
But
So
you
is
fill
the
it with-
length-
You put like a fire blanket in there, right?
Yeah, there's a fire blanket in there.
Okay.
See if I can get my flash on my phone real quick.
So is the length determined by aerodynamics, or is it by okay?
Oh yeah, sweet.
So is it determined by aerodynamics, or is it really all being used for storage?
That's the length is basically it does have aerodynamic effects, but as far as mine goes, the length was just basically the piece of cardboard that I used, tubing that I used for the outside. It does have aerodynamic effects. Obviously, you can get better heights and whatnot with a lighter weight, but then you also get a little bit less airflow. I believe I'm not positive on the exact science behind it, but I believe you would get probably a less height with a smaller one, but then with taller ones, you have to be a little bit careful as well, because there is the possibility for if there's any form of deformations in the tube, especially the longer they get, force being applied on it could make it fold in on itself.
Okay.
So when we're talking about like an 11-foot rocket, I mean, what is the goal of the competition? Is it like, okay, we're shooting for the highest height? Is that what you're going for, or is it like, are there a number? I'm sure there's like a number of different categories.
The most sparkles, you win that one.
Sparkles.
There you go. So there's a few different things that are taken into account during the competition. There's not just like one main objective. It's just like how well you perform in different things. So there's documentation. There is like the actual launch process, the understanding of the students. They're going to ask us questions about our rocket, how well we understand it, how well we can, define all the parts, say what materials we use, explain our reasoning behind it. There's a few other parts I don't remember off the top of my head. This is my first time in this club.
Yeah. I guess I was just wondering if it sounds like it's not really all about the height necessarily that it achieves.
Yeah, no, it's not all about the height. So
actually, yeah. So from an 11-foot perspective, like, is there, I mean, I'm sure that's just the standard height for like your competition in your club, but like, could you say like, oh, we're going to launch an 8-foot rocket because we think that that'll perform better?
Yeah, you could if you wanted to. One of the big things about I don't know if it's specifically for the competition, but about like how we launch our rocket is we have something called payload. And there's generally a science experiment being done on the inside of the rocket. I don't know how much I can talk about this year's payload, but I can talk about last year since it's over. So last year's payload, they had cancerous brain cells. I believe they were brain cells they were measuring specifically, but they were immortal cells, so they're cancerous cells. And they were put under high forces of gravity as the rocket was going up. And they were measuring what kind of impacts it would have on these cells to give an idea of what football players are feeling when they take high impacts to their heads.
Interesting.
Oh, snap.
So
crazy. Yeah.
So we never launched without a payload. We never launched without a payload. There has to be, a purpose for our launch. We can't just, these rockets are expensive, the ones that they're building. So like several $1,000s that we're building as a group. So we can't just, launch just for the fun of launching. We do have payload. We have obviously avionics. We have analysis. So we are collecting data actively. And that's also where part of that height comes into play.
Okay.
So you have to have space for the payload. You have to have space for the avionics. You have to have space for the big parachutes that we're going to be carrying in there and everything else. So
that's great.
So now this is really fun. My little cartoon minded brain just thinks of like all the things that you could put in a tube. Like, is it frogs? Is it cancer cells? Is it paint? dynamics, like what on earth is it? I don't know, but that's the kind of play. So on the comments of our YouTube video, please write what you think the coolest or most interesting payload would be. If you get it to this stage of the podcast, we'll know. Okay, what is the coolest or strangest payload that you can imagine? And that's really cool. Well, you'll have to come back and tell us about what the payload was. You got me like more interested with this whole payload deal. It's
I don't
like,
know.
oh, you know, it's important and all this. You know, it's not just for fun. Like, oh, wait, this is serious. This is science.
I just think overall it's interesting to think about, like, I guess just thanks for giving us an overview of the rocketry experience. I think is the main thing I took away from this chat. And, you know, I think my advice to parents out there whose child is kind of curious about computer science or rocketry in particular is, like, just let them tinker around with it, get them a rocket kit, launch it into space, launch it into the sky. Yeah,
NBD, just from your backyard.
But like launch it into the sky, and then I think you can start, like you said, kind of looking things up online, take it to the next level, but also start thinking about maybe sensors and start thinking about, like, because for me, again, when I've launched these rockets in the past, it's like you launch it, you see it, it's cool, move on. But like, what are the different data things that you could do with it? Like, can you put a challenge for a kid might be, can you put an altimeter on there and like see how high it goes?
Those are expensive.
Can you put something on there? Can you put a temperature sensor on there that allows you to see how the temperature changes as the rocket rises in the sky? You know, just little things that I think might be interesting little challenges to play with. So, do
you mind if I butt in with a few comments there?
Yeah, go ahead.
Go for it.
So, AppG, that's a website. It's let me make sure I'm going to say this correct. I forget if it's 1G or 2. So appg.com, right? Awesome. Okay, yeah, it is 2 E's. I can spell. Oh, no, this is different. I need to find it. But AppG has a website. I forget if it's .com, .org, or what. I have to look for it in a second.
So is it APGEE?
Yes. They're like the main place for a lot of rocketry stuff. They're a pretty big deal in rocketry. And so they have full-on kits you can buy there. Prices are a little bit expensive, and shipping is not very forgiving in price-wise. But if you just want, you know, an all-in-one solution, you know, you're not too worried about, like, okay, you know, I can pay a little bit extra for this rocket, but I just want it to be everything to work, everything to be out of the box, fit, then that's a great website to go to get parts.
Yeah.
Especially, you know, like for younger ones. And if you guys are interested in launching bigger motors, you do have to be over the age of 18 to be able to launch those motors, just because the certifications go like that. So if you're with your kid, you know, you can help design it, but you're going to have to be the one who takes care of a lot of that.
That's
true. Even if they're like 17, you're going to have to be the one who takes care of a lot of that.
Is that because of liability and just making sure that if anything does get destroyed, like they're old enough to pay for it?
Most likely, but I don't know for 100%.
Mm-hmm.
It's all right.
It's just though. There. I mean, that is good to know. That is good to know. Well, thank you so much for coming on the podcast today. You know, giving advice to youngsters coming up and sharing this experience. I certainly learned a whole ton, and I can't wait to hear about your adventures in the future and like what that payload is. I really want to know. So again, comment that payload on YouTube. You know, like, subscribe. Is there any way, if someone wants to reach out to you specifically, how would they go about contacting you? Should they look up Space City Rocketry? You know, how would they do that?
I don't think I'm going to show up if you search up Space City Rocketry.
Right.
I have socials. I guess you can look me up maybe on Instagram or something, and I definitely check my messages on there. My Instagram is VSADYGV.
Okay. Sounds good. Well, we'll go ahead and put it in the podcast description and the YouTube description, so they can reach out to you there. Well, thank you so much, and
thanks,
you know,
good to meet you.
Hopefully, you get to be a mentor of some some other person who's learning rocketry, get someone else into it.
Do some stuff for Coder Kids one day once this whole pandemic thing is over. So.
There you go. If you guys want to do a Rocketry class, I got you.
That would be great. Our most expensive class. It'd be awesome. All right. We'll see you later.
Thanks, Z.
All right,
Thanks.
see ya.
See ya.
Bye.
Bye.